Hi, it's Dwyer. It is Monday morning, July 28th, 2025. GamblersAdvisory.com, a free site. BettingAngle.us, a free site. Remember, the opinion you should follow should be your own. Just consider this video to be a second opinion from a complete stranger online. Now, we asked the question, what makes an elite fighter? How can you tell that a fighter is a serious threat to the status quo? Right? Many fighters have many great traits. What are some of the things that aren't readily apparent when you're watching a fight? Let's highlight a couple of them here in this video. In my description to this video, you'll find two links. One is a fighter I view as talented, but young, unaware, doesn't quite know what he's doing, gives away a lot. And ironically, in my opinion, he's one of the biggest punchers pound for pound in the sport. There's going to be a link to the fight that took place in the last few days between Aloys Jr. You need to remember that name. He's a cruiserweight. He's 6 feet tall. Right? He's a little undersized for heavy. But this is a guy who carries a heavyweight punch. Right? This is also a guy who has a chin. Let me add a caveat too. He's British. In the UK, the dominant paradigm right now, and this will change over time, right? Things run in cycles. But the UK at its core right now is a country of sluggers. You have a lot of guys who can really throw. We all know about AJ. We all know about Dubois. We're hearing about Moses Atama. I'm just telling you, David Adelaide is one of the biggest punchers in the sport. Fabio Wardley is one of the biggest punchers in the sport. Pound for pound, those guys are heavies. Pound for pound, Aloys Jr. is one of the biggest punchers in the sport. But with that power comes a trade-off. Right? Sluggers tend to be flat-footed. Right? Let me point out too, the UK has some fighters who I think are spectacular, who aren't sluggers. Right? Willie Hutchinson is an excellent fighter. Unfortunately, for movers like that, right, you need a chin. Hutchinson, who is a risk taker, doesn't have the best chin. Right? The UK has some diversity. Just understand, the flat-footed sluggers are the ones right now who are ruling the roost. So the first link in my description to this video is Aloys Jr. against Ellis Zorro. Now Zorro's interesting. He's also British. Zorro would be great as a sparring partner. He's right-handed. He, is skilled in that he knows how to do things. He knows how to clinch you. He knows how to frustrate you if you get inside. But he's 32 years old and he's a non-puncher. He needs to beat you by decision. Because he's a vet, he can extend a fight. Right? But he needs to rely on the judges. He lost 2 of his last 3 fights. Now in his 30s. See the writing on the wall here. 32 years old. He's coming off a 6-round bout. So this is a guy who's in the back 9 of his boxing career. The odds of him becoming a champion are slim. He's going to have to catch the right guy at the right time. But he's fought elite competition. So he was fighting Aloys Jr., and he was frustrating the daylights out of Aloys Jr. We'll talk about that fight, but let's talk about the second link that I have in my description. So, Zorro, who's an athlete, who can move, who's savvy, but who doesn't have a punch, right? He fought Cruiserweight champion Opetaia, elite. Legs, hand speed, power, but sets it up. Isn't flat-footed, right? And Zorro got stopped by Opetaia in the first round. Now, what I want people to do is to contrast the two films. The Zorro versus Aloys Jr. fight. Now, again, let me just say, it's my opinion that Aloys Jr. is one of the hardest punchers in the sport. I believe where you make your money gambling is by being a talent scout, spotting talent like this before the rest of the public does, right? I'm not saying Aloys Jr. is a finished product. What I am saying is if he lands right on anyone, that could be the ball game. This is the proverbial he only has to be right once fighter. But again, he doesn't know what he's doing. So, if you look at the Aloys Jr. Zorro fight, you're going to notice that Aloys Jr. is coming inside, and you'll notice he's always getting tied up by Zorro. Zorro knows where his hands are going to be. Zorro knows how to clinch him, knows how to shut him down, knows when he's going to enter. Right? Aloys Jr. doesn't have the kind of feet where he can be sudden in the pocket. You look at his upper body, and this isn't Mike Tyson. His upper body is not on a swivel. He's not moving side to side. There isn't a rhythm part of Aloys Jr.'s game. He's not trying to throw you off his rhythm. Right? There isn't a Joe Frazier part of his game where you understand he's bobbing and weaving. If you throw to his body, you might not catch him. He might be able to dodge your punch, get inside, hit you flush. Right now, Aloys Jr. is driving at 30 miles an hour. Right, folks? When you're fighting savvy vets, you can't be predictable like that. You need to have some unpredictability. Your opponent can't know when you're trying to enter the pocket. Your opponent can't know where to find your body. While your opponent can see your hands, he shouldn't be able to tie up your hands on demand. So Aloys Jr. struggled, folks. Struggled. The fight went the distance. Aloys Jr. could have lost this fight. He was awarded the decision. Don't be blinded by the ultimate outcome. Right? This is a possession fight. Everyone in the stands knew that Aloys Jr. is the up-and-coming fighter. Right? The judges gave the fight to Aloys Jr. It was razor close. Now, what wasn't razor close? Involving the same opponent, right? Zorro, was Opetaia's destruction of him. Now, let me make a point here. It's the odd duck that sometimes has a clear path to the bank vault. I personally believe that Jay Opetaia would be a major threat to the heavyweight title. Why? Because we're in a big clunky heavyweight era. Right? Think about how unusual this era was. You heard me mention Joe Frazier before. Right? In your mind, just picture how tall you think Joe Frazier is. The heavyweight division is flooded with guys who did well historically, who were 6'2" and shorter. But yet, we're coming out of an era where, you had 6'7", Deontay Wilder. You had 6'9", and I understand some of these heights might be a little embellished. You had 6'9", Tyson Fury. You had 6'5", 6'6", I'm guessing here, Anthony Joshua. Right, folks? Tall guys were ruling the roost. Right? How tall is Makhmudov? How tall is Lawrence Okolie? Right? But again, life's full of trade-offs. Many of these tall guys don't have the coordination of shorter fighters. Right? Understand how oversized everyone is. As I've mentioned here many times, Alexander Usyk is physically bigger than Sonny Liston, who was bigger than the heavyweight champ he dethroned, Floyd Patterson. Right, so here you have Jay Opetaia. And what I want people to do here is to just focus on his hands. Okay, you see Opetaia southpaw, so already he has a lot of these right-handed guys at a disadvantage. Then you'll notice he's moving his hands. You see his hands. He's not completely hiding them, but yet he is hiding them. Because you don't know what his next step is going to be with his hands. You can't tell when Opetaia is going to throw a punch. This is different than Aloys Jr. In other words, as you watch a boxing match, understand there's a relevant period of time before there's actually a point of contact. Great fighters hide when they're going to strike. So here is Opetaia against Zorro. And he comes out, he has his hands high. And he's moving them. Right? He's creating a distraction. You're the opponent. You're trying to get a rhythm. You're trying to figure out, okay, when is what going to happen and how? Right? You're reading your opponent. You're like, okay, let me see if there are any tells. Does this guy dip a shoulder before he tries to come in the pocket? And here is Opetaia, and he's moving his hands, right? This is a variation of dancing, right? Back in the day, guys would dance. Larry Holmes would literally get on his toes and be dancing around you, right? Part of the dancing was to throw off your rhythm. Part of the dancing was to control the rhythm of the fight, right? You see Larry and he's bouncing and you're thinking, okay, what's going to happen next? Well, here is Opetaia. Newsflash, Opetaia has some of the best legs in the sport. In other words, Opetaia can bounce, is moving against Zorro. But that's not enough. Opetaia wants to confuse you with his hands. So this is the coordinated athlete. By the way, Zorro, above average athlete. Right? Opetaia, one of the best athletes in the sport. This is the athlete who has great legs, who can dance. But that's not enough. He needs to hide his hands. He needs to keep you guessing on what he's going to throw. So here he is against Zorro, the same guy who frustrates the hell out of Aloys Jr. this weekend. The same guy who went the distance against Aloys Jr. this weekend. And Opetaia has his hands going like this. I'm not kidding. Look at the film. He has his hands moving like this. and he's outside, and of course, he's bouncing, right? He's not just moving his hands, he's bouncing, right? His legs are that good, he's that coordinated. He can be moving his arms and legs in a fight and not be distracted. You have an added blessing in the film of Opetaia against Zorro. You have one of the best announcers I've heard commenting on boxing. The Latin Snake, he used to call himself, Sergio Mora, right? A guy who beat one of my personal favorites, Vernon Forrest, a name you need to remember. Forrest, of course, beat Shane Mosley twice, right? Well, let me just say, you know who's cued in on Opetaia's bounce? And this is all pre-punch. This is all pre-punch. Sergio Mora is. So Sergio Mora is commenting on Opetaia's bounce. What I want you, the viewer, to look at are the hands that go with the bounce. So I'm fighting Zorro, and I see his hands to the point where he gets too close to me, I'll just tie him up. I'll just grab a hand, right? I see him getting ready to throw a big shot, I'll just go over and I'll just grab his arm, right? Here I am fighting Jay Opetaia. I don't know what this brother's doing, right? His hands are moving, his legs are moving, he's bouncing around. I'm like, what's he gonna do next? Right? I might take a step back and think, well, let me back up here. I'm sensing danger. I don't want this guy to be able to hit me. That's the other thing. Right? Zorro doesn't have ring coverage. Not Zorro, but Aloys Jr. So Zorro knows when he's out of range against Aloys Jr. He has no idea whether he's out of range. I mean, no idea against Opetaia, because Opetaia is doing his dance in front of him. But Opetaia is an athlete to the point where he can do the equivalent of a basketball drop step. In other words, he can go from bouncing, he can go from being up in the air. When he lands, he's ready. That back foot lands, he plants a front foot that's 2 to 3 feet in front of the back foot, and suddenly the guy who was bouncing outside is in your face. And you have an additional problem. You don't know if the southpaw guy is throwing a right hook or a straight left. You're a righty. Things happen fast. You don't have time to read his feet. You don't have time to say, okay, he has his left foot behind him, so he might be throwing this other punch, might be throwing a right hook. You don't have time because it happens in less than a second. So, Opetaia is bouncing in front of Zorro, and he just lands, steps forward, very quick movement, throws a straight left hand. Folks, it's his dominant hand. Understand how tough he is. Opetaia can drop so low that he can throw that straight left and hit you in the chest. You can't even preemptively guard your face. You know, think, okay, whatever he's throwing, I'm going to have my head protected. Because Opetaia might be throwing straight shots to your body. Well, let me cut to the chase. The Opetaia Zorro fight does not make it out of the first round. Opetaia hits Zorro so flush that Zorro falls backward and his head hits the bottom rope. Now, if you know boxing, you know there's a famous fight involving Davy Moore, where Moore's head hit the bottom rope. He then gave an interview after the fight and then died, right? Because the bottom of your neck here has your cerebellum, and hitting the bottom rope with that part of your body can dislodge a lot of things, right? The fight took place at Dodger Stadium in the early 60s. Moore was a fan favorite. This was right around the Benny Parrott, Emil Griffin fight where Parrott ends up dying. It got boxing off of TV, believe it or not, for a stretch of the 1960s. Well, understand, Zorro, fighters guard against landing on the ropes like that. Zorro is so stunned, confused, and out that his head hits the bottom rope. The ref steps in. The ref stops the fight. You understood the ref had to stop the fight. Zorro wasn't going to be able to continue against this level of athlete, right? And of course, Opetaia, who knows who he is, hops up on the front row and he's looking at the crowd, and you understand the crowd's baffled on what they just saw. Right, folks? We're here talking about Alexander Usyk. I need for people to consider the possibility. Just consider it. You don't have to agree with it. This is a free forum. You know, I'm a libertarian type. I want people to think what they think. Right? But who's the guy with foot speed who Alexander Usyk has beaten in the heavyweight division right now? Right? Don't get me wrong. He's one of the best athletes in the sport. Right? But if we're talking foot speed, we're not talking Dubois. If we're talking foot speed, and I'll agree, Anthony Joshua in the middle rounds is actually a pretty good athlete. Right? He's coordinated. He's a guy who has athleticism. You sense that in moments. Right? But in the first 3 or 4 rounds, he's not a guy flashing a lot of foot speed. He's certainly not a Jay Opetaia who is jumping up and down off the canvas so you see his legs. Then he's combining it with moving his hands. Right? He's not that level of freak athlete. Tyson Fury, let's face it, Tyson Fury is a 6'9" guy. He has the problem many tall guys have, right? He's not as coordinated as shorter 6'2", 6'3" guys, right? He's lost some of the gifts that he had earlier in his career, right? If we are real with ourselves here, I just want people to think about the possibility that a lot of Usyk's success, and I consider him to be a great heavyweight. Certainly he's someone you can't avoid from this era, right? But we're in a conversation zone here where people are saying, oh, he's the best over the last 20 years, right? Oh, he belongs in the conversation with all of these greats, right, folks? Every era has its signature. We're coming out of an era of oversized slugging heavyweights. Right? That's the era we're coming out of. In that era, the coordinated cruiser who makes it to the heavyweight division and who can move is king. Right? Would that work in the Ali Holmes era? I think it's an open question. Right? I think it's an open question. All I'm saying is that different eras have different, idiosyncrasies. Right? Floyd Patterson, I'm not saying Patterson was God or anything like that. Right? Patterson, of course, lost to Joey Maxim. Patterson's punch resistance was a little bit suspect. Ingemar Johannesson destroys him. Right? But understand, Floyd Patterson, too much of an athlete. Too much of an athlete for Archie Moore. Right? Patterson, if you look at the fights he won, right? Patterson, even Ingemar Johannesson in the rematch, Patterson, too athletic. Now, Patterson ends up getting destroyed by Ali and stuff like that later, right? But just understand, there are moments in the heavyweight division where you have these smaller, agile guys. And boxing's a sport of styles and matchups. Well, let me just say, Jay Opetaia, and I know he wants Gilberto Ramirez, right? Ramirez is a little bit different than Opetaia. Ramirez is the great boxer who's not the spectacular athlete, right? Opetaia is the spectacular athlete who, I would say, today, most in the heavyweight division would not be able to find. Right? In my opinion, he's too advanced for Daniel Dubois. Right? I believe Lawrence Okolie is extremely dangerous in the heavyweight division, right? Because Okolie has arguably the division's best jab. Let me just say, it's not a mobile jab, I'll agree, right? Prime Fury would have a better jab, but how close to his prime is Fury today? Just understand, an Opetaia, being a southpaw, being an athlete, would be able to get by the jab. Right? Also, Moses Atama, and Atama's interesting. I can't get a great read on Atama. But folks need to understand that if you look at Alexander Usyk's past, one of the toughest fights he had in his entire career was against Maris Briedis. I need for folks to understand that Jay Opetaia fought and beat Briedis twice. I would argue he's not going to find a more complicated guy than Briedis in today's heavyweight division. Moses Atama, by contrast, is inexperienced compared to Jay Opetaia. Right? So take a look at the two films. Aloys Jr. has a bright future, but let's just say he hasn't thought about things that Jay Opetaia is doing today in the ring. Right? With Opetaia, folks, the contest starts before he throws a punch. Right? You see him bouncing around, you don't know what he's going to throw. When I say ring coverage, I'm telling you he can hit you from distance with either hand. A big part of boxing is being able to win the slow rounds. Understand, a guy like this has such ring generalship that he's going to have some rounds where he just dampens your volume because you can't read his movement. You're afraid to throw a punch. The guy has hand speed and foot speed. He might be able to win rounds just dancing around you, landing a couple of straight lefts. Right? The talent gap between Aloys Jr. and Jay Opetaia is a profound one. And I view Aloys Jr. as viable at cruiser. Right? Think it through. This is one of the UK's best prospects. When you see him against Ellis Zorro, the same opponent that Jay Opetaia destroys in the first round, you realize he's not Jay Opetaia. And even if he tried to copy Jay Opetaia, we all have different strengths and weaknesses. You can't copy a freak athlete. That's like me deciding that I'm going to, copy Noah Lyles, the track star. Right? It doesn't work. So keep an eye on Jay Opetaia the same way Usyk, who's now 38, invaded the heavyweight division. Right? Just understand there's the possibility that Jay Opetaia might one day invade the heavyweight division. Right? This is the freak athlete who can move, who's getting stoppages, and who has fought tougher competition than you think. Those are my thoughts. Let me hear yours in the comment section of this YouTube video. Thanks for stopping by.